I never thought there would come a day when I'd be kicked out of the very house I grew up in. And on Easter no less. But that day, my mother only needed 3 words to turn me into a stranger. No hug, no greeting, not even a warm glance. Just a whisper laced with thorns, like a dagger, straight to my chest. "Don't come in." I stood there, on the tiled porch, holding a bottle of premium red wine and a basket of handmade chocolate eggs. The kind of gifts that used to make my mother beam with joy. But now, that woman just pulled the door almost shut, like I was a thief knocking to break in, not the daughter she raised for 28 years. I forced a smile, pretending it was just a bad joke. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice dry. But she shook her head. "No, Victoria, today isn't the time. The family's having a good time and—" She hesitated, glancing behind her like someone might overhear. "Emily said if you show up, she won't come inside." I didn't need to ask further. Emily, my half-sister, had been controlling the mood in this house ever since Mom remarried. With her perfectly styled blonde hair, a voice sweet as syrup but full of venom, and a long list of emotional issues that always won Mom over, Emily never had to share attention with me. Ever. Laughter echoed from inside. I heard glasses clink, and Uncle Mark's booze-soaked voice. "Cheers to a family that truly sticks together." Then Emily's voice rang out, sweet as artificial sugar. "This Easter is so peaceful, no drama, no negativity." My hand tightened around the wine bottle's neck. The April wind blew gently, rustling my dress, but the cold in my chest cut far deeper than the breeze. I had driven 3 hours from San Diego to Santa Barbara, taken time off work, and spent nearly $300 putting together gift baskets for the kids. I even wore the floral dress Mom once said looked so good with your skin tone. I thought, it's Easter, it's family, maybe this time would be different. Maybe I'd be welcome. I was wrong. Deep down I knew I wasn't wanted. I was just a walking wallet. The keeper of the power, water and internet bills. The one who owed them forever just for not being a burden. A background character in the family play, where Emily was the star. Mom looked at me, her eyes avoiding mine. She wasn't angry, just scared. Scared that my presence might upset Emily. Scared Emily might have another episode because of my negative energy. I nodded. "Well then, have a peaceful Easter," I said, my voice light as air, but each word sharp as steel. Then I pulled my phone from my purse and opened my payment app. My fingers tapped each item. Electricity, minus cancel payment. Minus cancel payment. Wi-Fi, cancel. Auto renew. Inside the house, the lights flickered. A loud shout came from the living room. "What the hell? The Wi-Fi's out." Emily's voice. No mistaking it. I looked straight into Mom's eyes, for the first time in years without backing down. "Don't expect that $3,200 anymore. I'm not your walking utility pole." Mom reached out as if to stop me, or maybe to cling to the last shred of dignity. But I was already turning away. My tires rolled over the damp pavement as I left in the fading sunlight. Behind me, the buzzing chaos of a hive just struck. No one ran after me, no one apologized, no one called out, "Victoria, don't go." And for the first time in years, I wasn't sad. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't look back. I had just placed a period on the role I used to play, the daughter who endured, forgave, and was never truly loved. I hadn't even left the neighborhood yet when I heard a shout behind me. "What the hell?" Emily's high-pitched voice rang out, dripping with rage. "Who cut the Wi-Fi?" I didn't turn around, just tilted the rear-view mirror enough to see my sister storming out the front door, phone raised like she was ready to punch the air. My mother followed behind her, clutching the pastel scarf she always wore when guests were over, her symbol of being the perfect suburban mom of Santa Barbara. The phone in my hand buzzed softly as the final notification popped up. "Water service canceled successfully." I smiled, but not with relief. It was the smile of someone who had just diffused a ticking time bomb buried in their chest after years of silent tension. Emily screamed again, louder this time. "This can't be happening? Why is everything shutting down?" I rolled down the car window as I drove slowly past the little alley in front of the house. "Ask someone who's actually in the house, Emily," I said loud enough for her to hear. "I'm just the ghost who got kicked out of the party." She spun around, her face bright red, gripping her phone like it might shatter in her hands. "Are you crazy? There are kids here. They're hunting eggs. How are they supposed to play without internet?" I shrugged. "Maybe you'll have to teach them how to play outside. Or, better yet, explain why Aunt Victoria wasn't invited this year." My mom stepped in, her voice trembling. "Victoria, you shouldn't do this. It's Easter. It's a day for family to be together." I laughed, this time dry as sand. "Are you seriously trying to lecture me about family values after slamming the door in my face?" I narrowed my eyes. "After letting Emily erase me from the guest list because of negative energy?" Mom opened her mouth like she wanted to explain, but no words came out. Another shout came from inside the house. "There's no water!" Uncle Mark's voice rang out, panicked. "Has anyone checked the meter?" I gently pressed the gas, starting to pull away from the driveway. But I didn't get far before a white SUV shot out of the garage and blocked the road. Emily stood in the middle of the path, hands on her hips, eyes blazing. "You don't have the right to do this, Victoria," she screamed. "That's Mom's house, it's where I live. You can't just destroy everything because you're throwing a tantrum." I didn't rush to get out of the car. Instead, I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to the streaming payment section. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max. One by one, I tapped "Cancel Service." When I finished, I looked up. "You think I'm just throwing a tantrum? No, Emily." I opened the car door, stepped out, and stood tall in front of my sister, for the first time in years. "I canceled everything because I'm tired of always being backstage. Tired of being a talking wallet, and if you think I'm going to keep funding this while you and Mom treat me like the unwanted stepchild, then you're crazier than I am." Emily's mouth dropped open, but she had no argument. A child's wail came from inside the house. My mom ran back in, panicked. The whole scene looked like a dark comedy. I returned to my car, shut the door, and rolled down the window one last time. Happy Easter! No lights, no water, no internet. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of positive energy, just like you wanted. And then I drove away. No looking back. No hesitation. No regret. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'd finally pulled the emergency exit lever on the prison I used to call family. Instead of heading straight back to San Diego like I planned, I stopped at a parking lot near Goleta Beach, took off my shoes and let my bare feet sink into the cold sand. The salty air and steady sound of the waves were the only things keeping me sane. I pulled out my phone and reopened my banking app. It took just seconds for the truth to hit me again, cold and naked. In the past 12 months, I had sent exactly $9,842 to cover their expenses. 3 years. 3 years of quietly paying for electricity, water, gas, internet for a house I wasn't even allowed to enter anymore, all because my sister wasn't comfortable with my presence. It all started when my dad, Charles, lost his job at 56. The construction industry tanked, his company shut down, and within months they were drowning in debt. I had just landed my first full-time job in finance, and I immediately offered, "I'll help cover the bills for a while, until Dad finds something new." 3 years later, Dad was still waiting on a project. And me? I'd become an ATM without a PIN. Water, $73/month. Electricity anywhere from $180 to $240 depending on the season. Internet, $91 for a high-speed package because Emily can't stand lag when working online. Add to that all the extras, family phone plan, streaming bundles, sometimes Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Spotify Premium, and recently a Peloton no one even used. I still remember the time Mom called me at 10 p.m., whispering, "Sweetie, the dentist said I need to redo 2 porcelain crowns. It's not urgent, but..." I'm embarrassed to smile. I wired $2,400 without question, not even a proper thank you. Just a, "I'll pay you back soon." But in my mother's dictionary, soon meant never. And then there was the whole thing with Emily and the pearl-colored SUV. She didn't qualify for a loan on a new car. My mom called, her voice sugary sweet. "Victoria, your sister needs a safe vehicle. Can you co-sign so she can get approved more easily? Just for a year." I nodded, like an idiot. 6 months later, I got a payment notice from the bank, because Emily forgot to pay for 2 months in a row. I had to shell out $1,700 just to protect my credit score. I used to think it was my duty. I used to believe in that whole older sister has to sacrifice thing. But the kind of sacrifice they wanted never had a finish line. It was like a bottomless pit. The more you poured in, the more disappeared without a trace. Without recognition. I once overheard Emily mocking me behind my back at a Christmas party. "Victoria always looks like she's about to read someone's will. Long face, no husband, no kids, but at least she's got money, so she's still useful." My mom didn't defend me. She just sipped her wine and said, "Oh, Emily, your sister's just tired." Tired? Yeah, I was tired. But not because of work, or because I had to help. I was tired of being laughed at while carrying the weight of responsibilities they should have shared. I once told Emily during a dinner at Olive Garden, "You know that 'lucky you don't have kids' comment you made? That's the exact reason you feel zero guilt calling me whenever you want money." She waved me off, smirking. "Please, don't act like you're some kind of saint. You're just buying a sense of control by paying bills." I remember the lemonade glass in my hand trembling slightly, but I swallowed the anger and smiled. Like the nice sister. The understanding eldest. Until today. Today, as I stood in front of the house that once felt like home, and was turned away by my own mother just because I made my sister uncomfortable, I finally understood. I was never truly part of this family. I was the sponsor. The silent wallet. The backup plan. Not anymore. I looked at my phone, the screen's glow lighting up my face in the dark. I tapped the final button. Cancel, auto bill pay, sync. The lights I used to keep on in that house would start to dim. The water would stop flowing. The Wi-Fi would disappear. And for the first time in years, they'd have to live with the consequences of the disregard they showed me. I don't remember how long I stood in front of that door that day. Just that both hands were full of grocery bags, and my heart clenched when I heard a familiar voice from the kitchen. It was a Friday afternoon, about 3 weeks before Easter. I had stopped by to drop off some organic items Mom liked, along with fresh baguettes from a bakery I'd just discovered in San Marcos. No one knew I was coming. I planned to leave the groceries and head out. But the laughter inside made me freeze. "She's always wound up like a violin string," Emily's voice rang out, clear, cold like a knife. "She takes everything way too seriously." "She lives alone. Who wouldn't be tense?" my dad chimed in. "Probably goes a whole week without talking to anyone. People like that snap easily." I stood frozen. My heart pounded so hard it made my ears ring. Then Mom spoke. Softly, but it cut deeper than anything else. "Well, at least she's useful. If not, we would have had our power cut long ago." Emily laughed loudly. "Exactly, at least she's got money. No kids, no love life, nothing to spend on, so it's only right she helps us." "I mean, I'm the one who needs support," Dad added, without hesitation. "I'm young, I've got a future. Well, she's just got her job, and her bank account." Mom didn't object. No one did. Just the sound of clinking glasses, and someone saying, "Shows." I took a step back, bumping into the porch wall, making one of the apple bags fall and scatter, but I didn't pick it up. I left the groceries, got in my car, and drove straight back to my apartment, without a word. That night, I didn't sleep. I went through every transaction on the secondary credit card I had given Mom, for emergencies only. And there they were. Line by line, each one hitting like a punch. MacBook Pro $1,899. 4-day meditation retreat in Sedona, $3,200. Full body treatment at Serenity Spa, $650. Plane tickets to Palm Springs, $438. Health app subscriptions, $74.99/month x 6 months. I opened the transaction list, cross-referenced the dates with Emily's Instagram posts with captions like, "Meditation is how I find myself amidst the chaos." I threw up right after. Not because of the money. Because of the shamelessness. I called Mom at 11 p.m. She picked up on the first ring. "Did you buy a MacBook?" I asked bluntly. "Oh, that was for Emily," Mom stammered. "She needed it to work remotely. And the retreat, it was to help her stabilize mentally. She cried for a whole month, didn't you see?" "With my money," I said, my voice hollow. "You make more than the rest of us combined, Vic. A few thousand shouldn't mean anything to you, right? I thought you wouldn't mind." I hung up. I couldn't believe I had just heard that from the woman who gave birth to me. My mother didn't apologize, she justified it. Like I was a bank, not her daughter. I didn't cry, I just felt empty. That night, I took a pair of scissors, cut the secondary credit card in half, and tossed it in the trash. But the cut inside me wasn't so easy to heal. At 6:17 p.m. the next evening, loud knocking slammed against my door. I was in the kitchen, pouring boiling water into a chamomile teacup, and nearly spilled the whole kettle. Looking through the peephole, I wasn't surprised. Mom, Dad, and Emily. All three of them crammed together in the third-floor hallway of my apartment building, their faces flushed. Out of anger, embarrassment, or humiliation in front of the neighbors? Maybe all of it. I didn't open the door right away. I let them knock a few more times. Just enough to stretch the tension. "Victoria, you're being ridiculous," my mom yelled, her voice at least an octave higher than normal. "We're living like it's the Stone Age," Dad bellowed from behind. Emily pounded on the door so hard I thought her hand would go straight through the wood. "Open up, or are you seriously letting the whole family go insane without Netflix or hot water?" I took a deep breath and opened the door. Just as Emily raised her hand to bang again, nearly stumbling inside. I kept the door halfway open, my expression ice cold. "Come in. But anyone who raises their voice over 3 decibels, I'm calling the cops," I said. No smile, no trembling. My small apartment instantly turned into a mini war zone. Mom started crying. Dad paced the room like a caged lion. And Emily, just as I expected, screamed. "Who do you think you are, the queen? You can't just cut everything off because your feelings are hurt." I gave a cold laugh, pulled my phone from my coat pocket and held up the screen. On it was the latest statement. Every charge, every auto payment. I'm not hurt. I'm used. And I just ended it. Dad grimaced. "It's not that big a deal, Vic. You're blowing this out of proportion. We relied on you a little." "But that's only because we trusted you, right?" "A little?" I raised an eyebrow. "Since you lost your job in 2020, I've paid over $26,000 just to keep the lights on. Mom goes to the spa, Emily to retreats, and everyone uses my card without even asking. That's your idea of a little?" Mom's voice cracked. "Victoria, you know I didn't mean to." "No, you just assumed I'd never say no. You're used to it." I cut her off, firm. Emily stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "So what now? You want us to get on our knees and beg?" I placed my phone on the table. Pulled a stack of papers from my document folder. "No need to kneel, just sign," I said, setting them down in front of Emily. "The lease transfer for your pearl-colored SUV. You have 30 days to move it out of my name. After that, I'm notifying the lender to freeze the account. Emily turned pale. You've got to be kidding. I don't qualify for a loan on my own. Not my problem. I tried to help you. You used that to treat me like a fool. I turned to Mom. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, all streaming accounts I've stopped renewing. Don't bother trying to log in. Tomorrow night, I'll reset every password and remove all devices. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Are you punishing your own family? I looked straight at him. I didn't blink. It's not punishment, it's liberation. It's not that I don't love you. I just won't let myself be used anymore. The room went silent, a heavy kind of silence, like something was about to crack. I thought Mom would say something, an apology, a moment of remorse. But no. You'll regret this, she whispered, tears falling silently. Family isn't something you can switch on and off like a light. I nodded. Yes, but self-respect does, and today I turned it on. Emily walked out first without saying a word. She slammed into the doorframe on her way out, leaving behind a sharp, echoing thud. Mom followed, eyes red, never once looking at me. Dad was the last. He stood there for a long moment, then shook his head. You're pushing yourself away from everyone. When the day comes that you need someone, no one will be there. I closed the door behind him. Better that than keep living around people who only need me when my wallet's full. And then I locked the bolt. Separated myself from them. No more bells. No more guilt. No more burden called filial duty. After the three of them left my apartment like a small storm that had lost its wind, I waited for something. Maybe a call, a message, even just an email titled, "We need to talk." But there was nothing, no phone call, no message, no knock at the door. Complete silence. Strangely, it didn't make me feel lonely. On the contrary, I felt lighter. As if, after all these years, the space I lived in was finally mine, no longer covered in demands, accusatory tones, or the haunting smell of invisible responsibility. 3 days after the confrontation, I opened Instagram to post a photo of the latte I made myself. Right at the top was Emily's story. Black background, white text, her classic passive-aggressive tactic. Some people will leave you when you need them most, but God sees everything, and karma is real. Underneath was a broken heart emoji, followed by the hashtag, family betrayal. I didn't like it. Didn't reply. I didn't need to. I took a screenshot, then exited the app like tossing an old bill into a fire. I was no longer the one who had to explain, clarify, or justify the truth. 2 days later, something truly unexpected happened. An email from Kelly, the wife of my cousin Ben, whom I rarely kept in touch with. The last time I saw her was at their wedding 3 years ago. A gentle woman, always keeping her distance from the rest of the family, like she was quietly observing from the sidelines. Subject: I just wanted to say. Sender: kellyheartworks@gmail.com. Victoria. I know this might surprise you. I saw everything at the Easter gathering. From beginning to end. I was in the corner of the kitchen when your mom turned you away, and I saw the look in your eyes when Emily said those things. I just wanted to say, thank you. No one in this family has ever stood up like that. Dared to cut ties. Dared to say enough. I always thought I was weak for staying silent, but you made me realize that not pushing back isn't grace. It's erasing yourself. You didn't deserve to be treated that way. I hope you're okay. Kelly. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. No tears, no nostalgia. Just a quiet feeling rising in my chest. Someone finally saw me. Not as a walking wallet, not as a shadow behind everyone's criticisms, but as a person, truly real, with boundaries and a voice. I typed my response word by word. Thank you, Kelly. I'm better than I've ever been, and your email is the first thing in a long time that made me feel not entirely alone. I used to think silence was the end. But maybe it's just the beginning. Victoria. I hit send. The email window closed. But another door inside me opened. I began to realize some relationships aren't worth holding on to. Some voices, the more you try to blend with, the more you lose yourself. My family? They think I'm a traitor, an ungrateful daughter. Hold. But I know what really happened. And now, I don't need to prove it anymore. I cleaned up the apartment. Deleted all autopay apps. Removed unknown devices from Netflix. Reset every password. This little apartment that used to be just a place I came back to sleep. Now it's where I truly exist. That night, I turned off my phone. Not because I was angry at anyone, but because I no longer needed to wait for someone to forgive me. For protecting myself. After years of feeling like the only lifeboat. In a family drowning in demands and blame. For the first time, I had come up for air. I no longer flinch when the phone rings. No more tightness in my chest when a bank notification pops up. No more scrambling to solve the math problem of how to survive after paying their electric bill. Instead, I wake up in a small, quiet apartment, no one blaming me, no one waiting for me to open my wallet, no one calling me a selfish person with money. I started living. The first thing I did was buy a second-hand nylon string guitar on Craigslist. Warm tone, just $60. Clean and still had a sticker that said easy to learn. It had sat in the corner of my living room for a long time, just decor. But now, it's the first sound I hear every morning. My fingers clumsily pressed C chord, then D, then G. Each note that rang out felt like a piece of old shackles breaking off. No one rushing me. No one mocking me. No one yelling from the next room to turn it down. Just me, and the sound filling my own space. Then, I signed up for a weekend photography class at the local community center. It was just a beginner class, but when I held a camera for the first time in 10 years, my heart raced like I was skipping school to do something forbidden. I photographed everything, from a rusty fence behind the parking lot, to sunlight through a glass of iced tea on a table. Every click of the shutter was a moment I existed without needing anyone's permission. One day I ran into Melissa, an old college classmate, once my best friend, who slowly drifted away because I was always too busy being the eldest daughter in a chaotic family. She recognized me first. "Victoria? Is that really you?" Melissa exclaimed in a small cafe in Old Town. "You look lighter than before." We talked for hours. Old memories came rushing back. Days we hid in the library to cram for exams, secret weekend road trips, laughing so hard it hurt because of a dumb joke. I told her everything that happened. No sugarcoating, no exaggeration, just told it like capturing an old photograph. Real, unedited. Melissa didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty sympathy. She just held my hand and said, "You're braver than anyone I've ever known." Those words were simple, but they made my heart feel less frozen than I thought it was. And then I started writing. At first, just a few lines in a journal, then short stories, about a woman lost in a nameless city, about wounds that don't bleed but still ache deep in the bones. No one edited. No one judged. I wrote for myself, for the girl named Victoria who had forgotten her own voice after years of being the loudspeaker for other people's needs. This week I have dinner plans with friends from my photography class. Next week, I'll go to the book fair in Santa Barbara. And tonight, I'll make myself a mug of hot chocolate, curl up on the sofa, and reread the stories I once wrote. Not to revise them, but to honor every word I once dared to speak. Someone once asked me, "Is silence worth it without a family?" I used to think no. But now, I know. Silence isn't being shut out. Silence is a gift I gave myself after too many years of living in other people's noise. I'm no longer a victim. I'm not anyone's savior. I'm no longer defined by how many bills I've paid. I am Victoria, 28 years old, living in my own little apartment. Learning guitar, learning photography, writing stories, and smiling at life. For the first time, because I want to. Not because someone else needs me to. I had just come back from my photography class when I saw something taped to my apartment door. The hallway light glowed yellow over a thin white envelope, loosely held by a strip of clear tape. No delivery person, no sender name. Just one line on the front. From Mom. Written in the handwriting I'd known since elementary school. I didn't open it right away. I sat down on the sofa, set my camera aside, and poured myself a glass of cold water. It wasn't until the sky turned fully dark, and the city lights cast shadows on my wall, that I slowly pulled out the thin paper, folded in thirds. Victoria? I don't know where to begin, and I don't know if you'll even read this letter. But I want you to remember that no matter how angry you are, no matter how far you choose to go from us, you are still my daughter. Even if you forget that. I never will. I've made many mistakes. Maybe I relied on you too much. Maybe I didn't protect you from Emily's harsh words. But I'm your mother. I'm not perfect, but I love you. Your father doesn't fully understand. And Emily, she's still young, she doesn't know how to express herself. But I believe, deep down, everyone knows how important you are. The house hasn't been the same since you left. The water line broke, Wi-Fi went out, everything's been a mess. But it's not just because of those things. It's because you're gone. You're still my flesh and blood. And you always will be, whether you forgive us or not. Mom. I folded the letter, placed it on the table, and sat still. No tears, not a single drop. No anger either. No bitterness. No emotional strings being pulled like before. All I felt was peace. I used to think I'd break down when my mother finally said I love you. Used to long for an apology. Used to crave acknowledgement, understanding, just to be held as a real part of the family. But now, I looked at the letter like an old slip of paper that missed the train. It came too late. It no longer mattered. Because I no longer stood at that platform. I don't need those words to live. Don't need a handwritten letter to exist. Don't need belated tears to validate years of being treated like a silent 18. I am no longer the shadow of that family. I am Victoria, 28 years old. Living alone, not because no one wanted to keep me, but because I chose to let go of those who only kept me when they needed something. I lit a scented candle by the window. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla filled the small apartment. I played music, not the kind Emily used to force on everyone, but my favorite acoustic piece I'd just learned on guitar. I stood in front of the mirror and looked into my own eyes. No more panic. No more hidden exhaustion. Just clarity. I no longer live as my mother's daughter, but as the author of my own life. They can call me ungrateful. They can spin all the stories they want. I don't care. Because for the first time in years, I am no longer the backup character in a play called The Perfect Family. I am the lead in a story titled Victoria, the woman who was strong enough to rise, walk away, and never look back. From Victoria's story, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiveness. It's walking away from the relationships that drained you. Family doesn't always mean unconditional love. Sometimes, staying true to your own worth means daring to say enough, and choosing peace instead. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal, it's survival, for a soul that's been too tired from loving and enduring at the same time. What do you think about Victoria's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it necessary for her to truly live? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come. I knew I was the outsider from the very first time I stepped into my husband's house. No one said it out loud, but the way they looked at me was enough to crush my chest. There was something cold, something toxic like smoke, that seeped into every meal, every conversation I was never fully a part of. For the past 6 years, I'd lived with a family that never truly wanted me there. And the scariest part? My husband, the one who was supposed to be my rock, was the most indifferent of them all. If you think being hated by your in-laws is the worst thing, wait until I tell you about that last Christmas. The one where everything literally exploded. My name is Everly, I'm 34, and I live in the suburbs of Boston. I work as an accountant for a small tech company. Not rich, but enough to live comfortably. I met Oliver when we were both in grad school in Massachusetts, and we got married after 2 years of dating. Back then I thought I had found the love of my life. A warm, funny man who always said he'd protect me from the world if he had to. What I didn't realize was that the world would start right in the house he grew up in. Oliver's family is very traditional in the way they proudly describe as American values. His mother, Helen, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled blonde hair and piercing eyes, never liked me. I knew it from the first handshake, when she squeezed my hand so hard it hurt and gave a half smile like she was inspecting a defective product. Oliver's two sisters, Candace and Julia, weren't any better. The three of them were like a block of ice, united in keeping me on the outside. At first I thought they just needed time. I tried starting conversations, brought nice wine to every gathering, even learned to make Helen's exact recipe for pumpkin pie to impress her. But every effort was like throwing stones into a dry well. They didn't care. They didn't want someone like me, and the more I tried, the more they backed away, polite, distant, and absolutely closed off to me. Helen was great at pretending to be friendly in front of others, but behind closed doors she treated me like a housekeeper, not a daughter-in-law. She'd make me wash dishes while she and her daughters sat sipping wine, reminiscing about European trips I'd never heard of. They'd talk about family memories, inside jokes only they understood, and laugh until they cried while I sat alone at the far end of the table, forcing a smile like I wasn't hurt. At first I used to tell Oliver. He'd just shrug and say, "You're overthinking it, Everly, they just need time." Candace said, "I don't fit into this family, what am I supposed to do?" "Don't let it get to you. My mom's just a little strict, but she's a good person." I heard those same lines for the first 3 years. By the 4th year, I stopped talking. They never added me to the family group chat. They planned ski trips to Vermont, birthday parties for Oliver's dad, whom I've never met because he passed away long ago, or lunch dates downtown. Without ever telling me. I only found out through pictures tagged with Oliver's name on Facebook, with captions like, "Family is everything." Last Christmas, they did a private gift exchange at Helen's house the day before the official celebration. I only found out because I came home early from work that day and saw Candace's and Julia's cars parked outside Helen's place. When I walked in, they were gathered around the Christmas tree, unwrapping presents, and fell silent when they saw me. Candace gave a weak smile. "Oh, you're home early, we were going to call you later." Helen took a sip of wine, eyes fixed on the TV. "A few small gifts, nothing big." Nothing big. And there I was, in my wrinkled work clothes, watching the three of them giggle together, holding Sephora bags, bottles of Italian wine, and cashmere scarves. Oliver was on his phone, not even looking up. But that wasn't the breaking point. The real breaking point came this Christmas. When they gave gifts to everyone in the family, except me. I didn't know what I expected when I walked into Helen's mansion that afternoon, but it definitely wasn't that kind of blatant humiliation. The house smelled of cinnamon and baked butter, the scent of warm memories I'd never been part of. The living room sparkled with fairy lights. The Christmas tree stood taller than anyone and was decorated perfectly, and everything looked like it came straight out of Better Homes and Gardens. Candace was laughing loudly at one of Julia's not-so-funny stories, while Helen stood in the open-concept kitchen, still wearing her cooking gloves but already reapplying her wine-colored lipstick. Oliver was pouring white wine for his mom, looking annoyingly carefree. He didn't even notice I was standing behind him for almost a full minute, completely ignored. When dinner started, everyone gathered around a long table covered with a white lace cloth, glassware, scented candles, and a turkey Helen dramatically placed in the center like some sacred offering. I sat at the far end, across from Candace and Julia, while Helen sat at the head of the table like a queen ruling her Connecticut palace. Dinner went exactly as I expected. All about them. Candace bragged about her trip to Napa Valley with her new boyfriend. Julia talked about the art exhibit she was invited to, though I knew she was just tagging along. Helen kept praising her daughters, throwing in the occasional jab about women who don't know how to make proper pumpkin pie. A not-so-subtle dig aimed directly at me. I said nothing, just smiled and took small sips of wine to keep myself composed. I thought. Maybe if I stayed quiet this time, they'd go easier on me. I was wrong. As dessert was being served, Helen clapped her hands 3 times like she was about to announce something grand. Before we eat the pie, I have a little surprise. She smiled brightly, eyes scanning the table. I immediately felt uneasy. Helen pulled out a large gift bag from under her chair and began handing them out one by one. The dark red bag had each person's name printed on a label. Candace received a leather handbag from a brand I knew for sure cost no less than $500. Julia got an all-inclusive 2-day spa voucher at a luxury resort. Oliver was given a bottle of rare whiskey he had mentioned during dinner 3 months ago. I sat still, gripping my wine glass, trying to swallow the icy feeling in my stomach. In the end, there were no bags left. My name wasn't on any of them. Helen turned to me with a fake look of surprise. "Oh dear, Everly, looks like I forgot about you." She laughed. Candace laughed. Julia giggled. Oliver, my husband, laughed too. The kind of laugh that didn't even try to hide it. I froze. For a brief moment, I felt like I was sitting naked in a crowded room, with no one bothering to hide their contempt anymore. "It's okay," I said, my voice strangely calm. I gently set my glass down, looking straight into Helen's eyes. "Good thing I didn't forget about you." The room went dead silent. Like my voice had just interrupted a perfect symphony. Helen raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what do you mean by that?" I just smiled. "You'll see." Candace frowned. Julia glanced at Helen. Oliver stopped laughing. The air turned cold for a few seconds, like a breeze had just swept through. I said nothing more. I just sat there, slowly slicing into my pumpkin pie, savoring every confused stare thrown my way. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel small. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Even if they didn't yet understand why. And that was only the beginning. I pulled a small box from my handbag, wrapped in shiny silver paper and tied with a red ribbon, like something straight out of a luxury gift shop. I handed it to Helen with both hands, slowly, making sure everyone at the table could see. "For you," I said, my eyes never leaving her proud face that was starting to darken. Candace and Julia looked at each other, then back at their mother. Oliver blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't believe that Everly, the quiet, gentle wife who always endured, had just hit back like this. Helen looked at the box as if it held a venomous snake. Her hand trembled slightly, though she tried to maintain her usual condescending attitude. "Oh, you didn't have to do that. I thought you knew I never expect anything from you." "I know," I replied softly. "This gift is very special." Curiosity started creeping around the room. Candace raised an eyebrow. Julia sat up straight. Oliver tilted his head toward me, no longer smirking. Helen untied the ribbon, cautiously unwrapped the paper. When she pulled out the thick stack of papers inside, I saw her hand begin to tremble for real. No more pretending. "What is this?" Her voice was hoarse. "Financial reports from your event planning company. And a few amended tax returns from the past 7 years. I poured myself another glass of wine, neither fast nor slow. "Did you know you underreported at least $240,000 in revenue over the last 3 years? And that's not even counting the personal expenses from the company account." The silence crashed down like a sudden storm. The atmosphere changed. No one laughed anymore. The only sounds were the rustle of paper in Helen's hands, and her sharp breathing. Julia was the first to speak. "Mom, what is this? Is this real?" Candace snatched the documents, skimmed through them, and her eyes widened. "You hid this from us?" Helen didn't answer. She stared at the pages as if she could will them to disappear. Her lips were pressed so tightly they'd gone pale. Her other hand clenched the armrest until her knuckles turned white. I took a sip of wine. "I just wanted to make sure you don't forget to report to the IRS like you forgot me at this dinner." Oliver spoke up, his voice low and sharp. "Everly, are you insane? You were spying on my mom?" I turned to him, lips curling. No, I investigated. There's a big difference. And I did it because I have eyes. I see things that someone as blind as you can't. Helen slammed her hand on the table and stood up abruptly. You have no idea what you've just done, Everly. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. I remained seated, eyes fixed on her. And I also know you've evaded taxes, hidden assets, and falsified financial statements. But you did something worse than that. Candace growled. What could be worse? I looked up, straight at her. You lied to your own children, hid money while pretending you couldn't help Candace fix her house, and turned Julia away when she was unemployed. Julia turned to Helen, eyes brimming with tears. You told me you didn't have a cent. You said you had to save for retirement. Candace's face turned red, and she slammed her hand on the table. And meanwhile you're going to luxury spas, booking first-class flights, and wiring money into a secret account? Helen looked at me like she wanted to kill me. But I saw something else in her eyes. Real fear. Oliver turned to his mother, stammering. Mom, is this true? Michael, don't listen to this woman, she's making things up. Is it true? My voice was ice cold. I pushed the USB stick toward him. All the evidence is here, bank receipts, statements, internal emails from your mom's accountant? Helen lunged to grab it, but Julia held her back. No, I want to see it. I want to know how much you've kept from us. And from Dad. The air in the room turned thick. And when Julia scrambled through the pages, their eyes darting back and forth in a frenzy. Helen turned to me, eyes blazing. You've destroyed this family. No, you started that a long time ago. I just pulled back the curtain. Oliver was silent, his face pale. I saw his gaze flicker between his mother and me, torn between blood and truth. But I no longer waited for anything from him. I just looked straight at Helen, no longer afraid. The Christmas dinner ended with a very special gift. Candace was the first to break the silence. She flipped quickly through a page in the file, eyes widening at Helen. Wait, what is this, a transaction from Dad's account? I tilted my head, slowly sipping my wine. Helen stood frozen, her hand gripping the chair as if she might crush it. Julia leaned forward, fingers trembling as she turned the pages. Stopping at a bank statement. Mom, you withdrew money from Dad's retirement account? This transaction is clearly from his 401k. No way, Candace stammered, turning to Helen, her face stripped of its usual arrogance. You told us you didn't touch a penny. Helen clenched her jaw, trying to stay calm, but her eyes began to go vacant. The wrinkles around her mouth twitched, like they were holding back another lie, but this time, the words didn't come out in time. What did you use Dad's money for? Julia's voice was tight, eyes red. I just borrowed it. I was going to put it back, Helen whispered. I laughed, a cold, sharp laugh like a blade. How? With the way you've hidden money and manipulated the books, I don't think you ever had a plan to put it back. Candace threw the papers down on the table. Oh my God, you lied to me. Said you had no money when I was trying to mortgage the house to buy a little condo for the kids. Julia had to borrow from her ex just to pay for hospital bills when the baby was sick. Julia bit her lip, clenching her fists. You watched us struggle like that and still pretended you couldn't help. Meanwhile, you were moving money out of the account of the man who lived with you for over 35 years? Helen turned away, but there was nowhere left to hide. Her eyes met mine. I said nothing, just sat there quietly, like a mirror reflecting the truth. The dining room door suddenly opened. Richard, Helen's husband, walked in wearing a gray sweater, still holding a half-finished cup of tea. He stopped when he sensed the tension, thick as a snapped wire. What's going on? Candace turned sharply. Dad, you need to see this. She picked up the file, her hands shaking as she handed it to him. Richard took it slowly. He began to read, his brow furrowing deeper with each line, his face flushing red. Helen, is this real? Helen stepped forward, grabbing his hand. I did it for the family. I had to keep the company, keep up appearances. I was going to tell you once things were better. Richard stepped back as if someone had splashed cold water in his face. You? Took money from my retirement account without saying a word? I had never seen Richard so angry. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling, but full of barely contained rage. I worked my whole life for that money, Helen. I trusted you would never touch it without my consent. Helen tried to recover. I just needed a small amount to reinvest. You know the company's been struggling. Candace screamed. It's not about the company, Mom. You used that money for luxury, travel, shopping, transferring it into undeclared private accounts. You lied to all of us. Richard could no longer hold himself together. He threw the papers to the floor, then backed into the wall, bracing himself on the table for balance. I feel betrayed. I can't believe you did this. Richard, please, I had my reasons. There's no reason good enough to deceive your partner like this, his voice snapped. I trusted you. I trusted you completely. Julia bowed her head, tears spilling down. Mom, how could you? Helen turned to me, her eyes now blazing. You're behind this, you set me up, I knew it. I smirked. No one set you up, you've been setting yourself up for years, I just pulled the curtain down. Helen lunged toward me, but Richard raised his hand to stop her. Enough. Helen, if what I just read is true, then I'm going to speak to a lawyer. I can't live with someone who took everything without a second thought. This time Helen didn't fight back. She stood still, lips pressed tight, her face pale like ashes. And in that room, still glowing with Christmas lights, a family officially shattered. But it wasn't over. I knew it was only the beginning. Richard didn't respond. He stood frozen by the dining table, eyes locked on the scattered papers on the floor. I saw his hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His chest rising and falling violently, like he was trying to swallow a rage too big to speak. I can't believe this, he mumbled, but the sound echoed in the silent room like a bomb. Candace and Julia were both silent. Oliver sat frozen, eyes darting from me to his mother, and then back to his father. The whole room seemed frozen in a chaotic moment, where all masks had fallen, but no one knew what to do next. Richard stumbled a step forward, then stopped. I can't breathe. He clutched his chest, his face turning pale as if the blood had drained out. Dad? Julia cried, jumping to her feet. I rushed to him at the same time as Candace. Oliver sprang from his chair, his glass shattering on the floor, but no one looked. Richard! Helen screamed. But her voice rang out shrill and theatrical, like she was playing a bad scene in a bad play. He bent over, his whole body collapsing forward like a tree cut at the base. I caught him along with Candace, but he was heavy, limp. His body convulsed slightly before falling completely still. Call an ambulance, I shouted, pulling my phone from my pocket instinctively. He's having a heart attack. Julia immediately dialed 911, her voice shaky but clear. We need an ambulance, please hurry, please. Helen dropped to the floor, holding her head in her hands. Oh God, Richard, I'm sorry, don't leave me. But no one turned to her. No one comforted her. No one believed her. I looked at Helen, my eyes sharp as blades. She was trying to cry, but there were no tears, just fake sobs and deliberately trembling hands, as if performing for some invisible audience. Don't touch him, I said coldly as she started to approach Richard. Candace nodded. Stay back, Mom, you've done enough. The words hit Helen like a slap. She froze, then turned to look at her daughter with eyes that held no power anymore. The house that once echoed with laughter now held only heavy breathing, the ticking of the clock, and the shivering of a man lying unconscious on an expensive hardwood floor. About 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, sirens blaring. 2 EMTs rushed in like a storm. Helen scrambled forward, trying to lead the way, but one of them brushed her aside without hesitation. We need space. I stepped back, Julia pulling Candace with her. Oliver stood stiff in the middle of the room, as if his brain had shut down. Helen stood dazed, then, suddenly dropped to her knees, sobbing loudly like a scene from a cheap drama. "Please, save him, he's my husband, please." I watched her, seeing every calculated movement, every performative breath. No real tears. No one held Richard as he convulsed. The only person holding his hand was Candace. One of the EMTs turned to us. "He still has a pulse, we're taking him to the nearest hospital." "Whose family?" Candace nodded. "I'm his daughter, I'll go." I placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. "I'll drive you both and follow behind." Helen looked around, her expression lost. I'll come too," Julia said coldly. "No one's stopping you, but don't pretend anymore. We've seen everything." Helen said nothing more. She stood up, staggering after the stretcher like a ghost. We walked to the car in silence. Oliver trailed behind me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see that lost look on his face again. Whatever was left between us had burned to ash the moment Richard collapsed and Helen cried her fake tears. When the ambulance turned off the street, I looked up at the night sky. There were no stars. Only swirling black clouds. That Christmas had no prayers. No warmth. Only truth, wounds, and consequences. And I knew Richard's collapse was only the beginning. The hospital waiting room was strangely cold. Not the cold of air conditioning or November weather, but a quiet, creeping chill that seeped into the skin from prolonged silence and mounting tension. Candace and Julia sat close together, eyes blank, staring off into nothing. I stood near the reception desk, gripping my phone. The screen had long since gone dark, but I didn't let go, as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. Mike sat a few chairs away, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, silently watching. No one spoke for nearly an hour. Then suddenly Mike stood up and walked over to me. "Are you satisfied now?" I blinked, thinking I misheard. "What?" His voice no longer carried calm. It held a kind of shock, but not because his father was in the ER. It was because of me. "This is what you wanted, right? Exposing my mom, humiliating the whole family, sending my dad to the hospital?" I stood frozen, unable to believe what just came out of the mouth of the man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years. "You think I wanted this to happen? You planned it, you held on to all that, you brought it out on Christmas Day in the middle of family dinner, you knew my dad had a heart condition, you think I didn't notice?" Every word hit me like a blow. "So, you're not mad your mom lied, embezzled money, betrayed your father? You're mad I didn't sit still and silent like some porcelain doll?" Mike clenched his fists, his eyes red. "You couldn't have handled it differently? Spoken to her privately, chosen a better time?" I laughed, a dry sound drained of emotion. "A better time? What do you think I've been doing for the past 6 years? I waited, I swallowed my pride, I gave your mother chance after chance to be decent, and all she did was crush my dignity, and you just stood by." Mike turned his face away, but I didn't stop. "I used to think you were neutral, I tried to understand you were caught between your mother and your wife. But today, when you saw clearly that your mother stole money, emptied your father's retirement, lied to your sisters, and you're still standing here blaming me? So tell me, Mike, whose side are you on?" He looked back at me, his eyes heavy. "I just wanted to keep this family together." I stepped back, like he had just slapped me. "This family was never together, Mike, can't you see? Your mother is a manipulator, she never wanted me here, never. And you chose her. Over and over again. You chose silence." Candace stood up, her voice cold. "Mike, don't. Mom was wrong, we all saw it." Julia added. "Everly didn't break anything, she just brought the truth to light. Mom's the one who put Dad in this position." Mike said nothing, he just looked at me, his eyes shattered. I looked right back, no longer angry, just an immense, cold emptiness spreading through my chest. "You just lost your last chance to do the right thing. I don't need you to protect me, Mike. I just needed you to see me." "But you never did." I slid my wedding ring off and placed it in his hand. "This is the last time I wait for you to choose me." Mike said nothing, his hand clenched the ring so tightly it trembled, as if letting go would shatter everything. But it was already too late. I turned away, not caring what he would say next. I'd heard enough. And for the first time in 6 years I felt relief. A man can be your husband, but if he doesn't stand by you when you need him most, he's just a stranger carrying his mother's last name. I left the hospital right after the doctor announced Richard was out of critical condition but needed close monitoring due to severe heart damage. Candace and Julia stayed to watch over him for the night. Helen had disappeared after a nurse asked her not to interrupt the treatment. Mike was still sitting in the waiting room, looking like someone had drained the life out of him. But I didn't look back. No need. As I walked out to the parking lot, the night wind cut across my face like a blade. But instead of feeling cold, I felt weightless. The wedding ring in my palm felt like a foreign piece of metal, a relic from a life that no longer existed. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the wedding photos on the wall, the souvenirs from our honeymoon in Oregon, the leather chair where Mike used to sit and read sports news. Everything was familiar and completely foreign. I held the ring, placed it in the jewelry box, then took out a small suitcase. Just a few clothes, my laptop, wallet, and passport. I didn't need much, I just needed to leave before I started doubting my decision. The next morning, I sent a short email to the lawyer I had quietly prepared to contact since last month, when I began investigating Helen. The subject line read simply, "Begin divorce proceedings." That afternoon, I got the first message from Mike since our conversation at the hospital. "Everly, I need to talk, please." I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, Helen was summoned by federal authorities for investigation on tax evasion and corporate fraud. All the documents I had given to my lawyer had been sent to the IRS and FBI. Not only was there evidence of tax evasion, but also proof that she used fake employee names to withdraw funds from the Small Business Support Program during the COVID-19 period. The local media picked up the story. Newspapers published photos of Helen leaving court in a gray suit, no makeup, hair a mess. There was no trace left of the proud woman who once smirked through Christmas dinner. I didn't feel satisfied. Just right. After being discharged, Richard filed for divorce immediately. Candace told me via text that he had seen a lawyer straight from the hospital. Julia cut off all contact with their mother. Helen called, messaged, even wrote handwritten letters. But no one replied. Helen lost everything. Her family, her reputation, her company. It all collapsed. And Mike? He sent a flood of emails, ranging from angry to begging. One of them read, "I didn't know it would go this far. You planned to leave me from the start, didn't you?" I sat and stared at the screen, not bothering to reply. There was nothing left to explain. If, after everything, he still thought I was the problem, then there was nothing left to save. One afternoon near the end of the month, Mike showed up outside my new apartment. I looked at him through the security door. "Everly, please, just 5 minutes." His voice was tired. His eyes sunken. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" "I've thought a lot. I was wrong. I should have stood by you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You weren't just wrong, Mike. You chose your mother. You watched me be humiliated, excluded, turned into a joke, and when I stood up you said I was destroying the family." He looked at me, silent. "I know you don't trust me anymore. But I'll do anything to make it right." I shook my head. "You don't need to. I'm done waiting for anyone to make it right for me. I've already made my choice." I closed the door. Gently. Firmly. No tears. No anger. Inside the apartment, I sat on the sofa, watching the soft golden light stretch across the wooden floor. For the first time in 6 years, I felt peace. Not because Helen fell. Not because Mike finally understood. But because I had freed myself. After the last time Mike showed up at my door, I didn't hear from him again. At least not for the first few weeks. I figured he needed time to accept the truth, that I wasn't coming back. That the wife he thought would wait forever had left, not with a fight, not with accusations, but with a door that quietly closed without fanfare. 3 weeks later, the first call came. I didn't answer. 4 more calls followed, a voicemail over 2 minutes long, an email with the subject line, "I'm sorry." I sat in a cafe near my apartment, looking at his name on the screen, and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just silence inside me, like a lake after a storm. I reached out and tapped block number. That was it. No hesitation. No regret. That was the moment I knew I had truly let go. Every morning I wake up at 6 a.m., make myself a cup of coffee, and open the window to watch sunlight pour across the pristine white walls of my new apartment. I'm renting a small studio in the North End. Not far from downtown, but quiet enough that I can hear the leaves fall as winter draws near. I've rebuilt my life on my own terms, neat, peaceful, free of yelling voices or awkward dinners. I've learned to grocery shop alone without feeling empty. Learned to eat dinner in silence without feeling lonely. I buy myself fresh flowers on Fridays, read on Sundays, and revise my personal financial plan at the start of each month. I don't talk to Mike. I don't text his mother. And when Helen was officially charged with financial fraud, I didn't celebrate. I just folded up the newspaper and threw it in the trash. Because by then I had understood. Real victory isn't when someone else falls. It's when they no longer have power over you. Candace and Julia still keep in touch. They send thank you notes, even though they know I don't need them. Once, Julia wrote, "If it weren't for you, our whole family would still be living in denial. I'm sorry we let you suffer for so long." I didn't reply, but I smiled. That was enough. A month after Helen's case hit the major newspapers, Mike called again. A strange number. I knew right away. This time, I didn't wait for the third ring. I declined the call. 3 days later he emailed. "I have no excuses left. But I've started therapy. I need to fix everything, including myself. Not to get you back, but so I can look in the mirror without shame." I read it. Then clicked archive. I no longer need an apology. I need freedom. And I found it on my own. One Saturday afternoon, as Boston fell into an early cold rain, I sat inside the old bookstore at the corner of Hanover Street. I sipped coffee, flipping through a novel I never had time to read when I was still Mike's wife. A middle-aged woman sitting next to me smiled. "That's a good one, you'll like the ending." I nodded, smiling back. I just had an ending of my own. She didn't ask more. I didn't need to explain. I stepped out of the shop as the drizzle continued. The streets were wet and cold, but I felt strangely warm. Freedom for the first time in my life wasn't a distant idea anymore. It was an afternoon without shouting. A hot cup of coffee no one complained about. Being alone, and feeling full. I used to think happiness was being loved. Now I understand, happiness is learning to love yourself. I don't know what lies ahead. But one thing I know for sure. I will never go back to being the woman I was in that house. I've made my choice. I choose me. Everly's story is a powerful reminder of what it means to wake up after years of being ignored and dismissed by the people closest to you. She didn't seek revenge through anger, but through truth, and the strength to walk away when she realized she deserved better. In real life, sometimes we need to let go of toxic relationships, even if it means being alone. Because loving yourself isn't selfish. It's the journey of reclaiming your worth and your peace. What do you think about Everly's decision? Would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next emotional family story. I am no longer his daughter. I stared at the name tag on the reception desk, feeling the blood in my veins turn to ice. Lucy. The family disappointment. The bold, tiny letters cut straight into my heart. I blinked once, then again, hoping I had read it wrong. But no. The words remained, indifferent, as if someone was merely labeling a cocktail rather than trampling on a person's dignity. Laughter erupted from the bar. I didn't have to look to know whose voice it was. Karen, the woman who always found a way to belittle me under the guise of a harmless joke. I lifted my gaze and met her smug, satisfied smirk as she sipped her wine. My heart pounded, not from fear but from anger. I clenched my fingers around the name tag, feeling the cold plastic press against my skin. What could I do? Throw it on the floor? Tear it apart? Grab a glass of wine and toss it in her face? No. I knew this game too well. Karen always knew how to provoke me. If I reacted, I'd be the hot-headed, selfish daughter. The disappointment. Just as she had labeled me. I took a deep breath and placed the name tag back on the desk, as if it meant nothing to me. But inside, I knew. I hadn't just put down a name tag. I had let go of the final drop of patience I had left. My father's birthday party was held in the luxurious mansion Karen never missed a chance to brag about. A grand chandelier sparkled overhead, and the dinner table was set with extravagant dishes, meals he never let me touch as a child. The guests were his closest friends, or rather, people who matched his status. Wealthy, powerful. I stepped inside, feeling like an intruder. No one truly noticed me. The handshakes, the laughter, the toasts. They all passed by without a space for me. I glanced around, searching for a familiar face. Where was my father? Then, I saw him, standing in the center of the crowd like a king greeting his subjects. He was beaming as Olivia, Karen's daughter, boasted about her new job. Beside her, Hunter, Karen's son, nodded in agreement with a proud smirk. They were the perfect children my father had always wanted. And me? I was just an afterthought. My father lifted his gaze, his eyes landing on me for less than a second. A fleeting moment, but long enough for me to understand everything. The distance, the indifference, and worst of all, the disappointment. He hadn't wanted me to come. He didn't even bother to hide it. I let out a quiet, bitter chuckle. What had I expected? A hug? A warm, "My dear daughter, I'm so glad you're here"? Don't be naive, Lucy. I made my way to the drink table, picking up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. My hand trembled slightly, but I wouldn't let anyone see it. I wouldn't let anyone see me as weak. What the hell are you doing here, Lucy? I asked myself. I took a sip, feeling the cold liquid slide down my throat, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. Then, footsteps approached from behind. Lucy, long time no see. Karen's voice, syrupy sweet, laced with poison. I turned, meeting her artificial smile. Karen, I gave her a small smile. It really has been a while. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes scanning me with a calculating look. I'm surprised to see you here, I thought. She trailed off before shrugging. You were busy with, what was it again, freelancing? I knew exactly what she meant. I didn't work for a prestigious corporation. I didn't have a shiny title. I didn't live up to this family's standards. I smirked. But before I could respond, she let out a soft chuckle, patting my shoulder lightly. But anyway, I suppose it's nice that you're here. Then, lowering her voice just enough for only me to hear, she added, especially since someone prepared a little gift for you. A gift. I frowned, then followed her gaze toward the reception desk. And then it clicked. The gift was that damn name tag. Rage surged through me like a storm. But instead of letting it consume me, I felt something else. A strange, chilling calm. I am not that 14-year-old girl anymore. I am no longer the weak girl who had to endure their cruel jokes. I set my glass down on the table and took a deep breath. If they wanted to play with me, I would show them that I was no longer the Lucy they could mock. I stood in the middle of the party, the laughter and chatter around me nothing more than a cheap background track. Memories crashed over me like a storm, dragging me back to a time when I was still a naive child who believed my father's love was unconditional. Back then, I was his whole world. I remember the way he used to hold my hand tightly when crossing the street, the afternoons he taught me how to throw a baseball in the backyard, and the nights I curled up in his arms during thunderstorms. I used to think that love would never change. Then Karen came along. My father remarried when I was 10, and everything changed so fast that I didn't even realize I was being pushed to the sidelines of his life. At first I tried to adapt. I smiled when my father introduced me to Karen as the sweetest little girl you'll ever meet, though his tone made it sound like I was just a child who needed to fit in rather than a real part of the family. Karen, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and syrupy sweet smile, hugged me tightly the first time we met, and said, "We're going to be such a happy family, Lucy. We're going to love each other like real family." But we never truly existed as one. Karen only loved her 2 children, Olivia and Hunter. I was just an obstacle. Within a year of their marriage, my father was no longer my father. At first, the changes were subtle. He started missing my parent-teacher conferences, but never forgot to attend Olivia's dance recitals. He was too busy to take me to the park as promised, but he always made time for Hunter's baseball games. I still remember a Friday afternoon when I was 11. I stood outside school for nearly an hour, waiting for him to pick me up. But he never came. I walked home, tears streaming down my face, only to find him in the living room, laughing with Karen and her kids. "Did you forget about me?" I asked, my voice shaking from running and crying. He just sighed, not even looking me in the eye. "Lucy, I was busy. You're old enough to understand, aren't you?" Understand? So Olivier and Hunter didn't have to understand? But I said nothing. Because I knew that in this house, my voice didn't matter. By the time I was 13, I had completely become a shadow. Olivia and Hunter were treated like a princess and a prince, and me? I was the one who did everything. "Lucy, watch Olivia for me." Lucia washed the dishes. I cooked dinner. "Looky, you're older now, stop asking for so much." Older. That was their excuse for every injustice. I was older, so I had to give in. I was older, so I had to understand. I was older, so I no longer needed my father's attention. I remember once, Olivia spilled milk all over the table. Karen turned to me and said, "Clean it up, Lucy." "But I didn't do it," I protested. Karen simply shrugged. "But you're the older sister." Olivia and Hunter could make a mess, scream, do whatever they wanted and face no consequences. And me? I had to stay silent and accept it. Everything reached its breaking point when I turned 18. Before my mother passed away, she had set aside a college fund for me. Every penny was saved with the hope that I could become independent and leave this house behind. But when I needed that money, it was gone. I still remember the shock of opening my bank account and seeing the balance at 0. My throat went dry as I turned to my father and asked him what had happened. And he said it calmly, as if he were talking about the weather. "I used it to help Hunter get into college." My heart shattered. "That was my money," I whispered, my voice trembling with anger. "Hunter needed it more." He shrugged. "You can still apply for scholarships, right?" At that moment, I laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh. I didn't need to ask Karen. I already knew she was the one who had pushed him to do it. In her eyes, I wasn't worth a future. I hated him from that moment on. That night, I packed my bags and left that house forever. I took care of myself, working any job I could to survive. I didn't need his money, his fake love, or this so-called family. But now, standing in the middle of this extravagant party, with that family disappointment name tag sitting on the table, I realized something. I wasn't the one who should be disappointed. They were. I tightened my grip on my glass and smiled. If they thought I would stay silent and endure like before, they were wrong. I didn't just leave that house with a suitcase. I carried every scar they had carved into me over the years. The day I stepped onto that bus out of town, I swore I would never need them again. And I kept that promise. I threw myself into my studies, working 3 jobs at once to pay for tuition. While Hunter enjoyed his college life with all-night parties and luxury vacations funded by my father, I worked myself to exhaustion just to afford a cramped apartment near campus. I never complained. I had no time for hatred, no energy for nostalgia. I had one goal: never go back to that house. And I succeeded. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. No one from my family attended my graduation. No texts, no calls, nothing. But I never expected them to. I stood among hundreds of graduates, watching as parents hugged their children, took photos, and celebrated their achievements. And me? I stood there, proud of myself, in silence. Even after leaving them behind, I was never truly free. Every now and then, I would receive invitations to my father's parties. Not because he cared, but because he wanted to maintain the image of a good father. I never wanted to go, but the pressure from relatives, the ones who always told me, "Don't let the past affect the family," forced me to show up a few times. And each time, my father found a way to belittle me. I remember a Christmas a few years ago. I reluctantly accepted the invitation and returned to the house I once called home. I had hoped that, after all these years, maybe my father had changed. But the moment I walked in, I knew everything was the same. Hunter, dressed in an expensive suit, bragged about the job my father had pulled strings to get him. Olivia sat on the couch, a diamond ring glinting on her hand, boasting about her latest European vacation. And my father, upon seeing me, simply smirked and said, "Still doing that freelance work?" Up. He didn't wait for me to answer. "Times must be tough. I could ask around and find you a real job." A real job. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. As if everything I had built meant nothing. I wanted to tell him that I had started my own company, that I was more successful than ever, that I didn't need his help. But I knew it wouldn't matter to him. To my father, if I wasn't following the path he had set, I would always be a disappointment. I placed my glass down, met his eyes and said, "You don't need to worry about me, I'm doing just fine." But he only smirked, as if I were just deluding myself. "If you're really doing well, then why are you here alone?" I left the party right after that. After that night, I refused every invitation from my family. I blocked Karen's number, ignored Olivia's messages, and disregarded the passive-aggressive comments from relatives. I didn't need them. But sometimes, whether I wanted to or not, I still had to face my father. The last time was at Olivia's wedding. I didn't want to go, but some part of me thought I should. If only to prove that I had moved on from them. When I stepped into the reception hall, my father looked at me in surprise. Not because he was happy to see me, but because I didn't look like the failure he had always assumed I would be. "Lucy," he blinked. I wore an elegant red dress, my hair in a sleek updo, my makeup subtle yet sharp. I was no longer the weak girl he once knew. "Hello, Dad," I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He studied me for a moment, before clearing his throat. "Have you found a stable job yet?" I almost laughed. Even now he couldn't acknowledge that I had succeeded. I didn't need to find one. I built my own. "Oh?" He nodded, but there was skepticism in his eyes. "That's fine, I suppose. But if you ever want a real career, I can help you." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I just felt pity. He would never admit that I had done well without him, because if he did, he would have to face the truth. That he had been wrong. I placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a small smile. "No need, Dad. But you can be proud of me. Or not. It makes no difference to me." Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned. I was no longer that 18-year-old girl, desperate for his approval. I didn't need it anymore. Now, standing at his birthday party, staring at the family disappointment name tag on the table, all I felt was amusement. Did they think this would hurt me? They had no idea that I had let go of this family a long time ago. I lifted my glass, taking a slow sip of wine. If they thought I would stay silent, they were wrong. I let my gaze sweep across the room, where everyone was dressed to impress, laughing and mingling as if they were part of some perfectly orchestrated performance. But I wasn't part of the show. No one welcomed me. No one truly cared that I was here. Their glances flickered toward me for only a moment, before quickly moving on, as if I were a smudge on their flawless masterpiece. That was fine. I was used to it. My father stood in the corner of the room, a glass of wine in hand, engaged in conversation with a group of powerful-looking businessmen. When his eyes landed on me, I saw a brief flicker of surprise. But it lasted only a second. Then his expression returned to its usual indifference, as if my presence here meant nothing at all. I almost laughed. How foolish I had been to ever expect more from him. I slowly made my way toward the bar, where Hunter and Olivia were chatting with a group of relatives. I had no intention of joining them, but Olivia's sharp voice cut through the air, making me pause. Dad was so generous to pay for my wedding, but honestly, I think that's only natural. She twirled the sparkling diamond ring on her finger, her voice dripping with smugness. Of course. Hunter nodded. Dad always prioritizes the kids with potential. The kids with potential? I pressed my lips together, taking another sip of wine to swallow the anger rising in my throat. So what did that make me in their eyes? But I didn't have time to be angry. Because at that moment, I realized the most important thing of the night. A small table was set near the entrance, where name tags were neatly arranged. No one seemed to pay much attention to them. Except me. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the names. Uncle Mark. Cousin Rachel. Neighbor Tom. And then I saw it. My heart stopped for a second. Right in front of me was a tag with my name on it, but underneath, printed in small yet unmistakable letters, were two words that made my blood boil. The disappointment. I picked it up, my fingers tightening around the edges until my nails nearly dug into my palm. What a pathetic joke. I didn't need to ask who did this, I already knew. At that moment, laughter rang out from the bar, a voice so familiar that I didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. Karen. She was laughing, a glass of wine in her hand, her eyes gleaming with amusement as she watched me. I took a deep breath and slowly placed the name tag back on the table. I wasn't going to let them win. I didn't snap it in half, I didn't throw it to the floor. I placed it back neatly, aligning it with the others as if nothing had happened. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to react the way they wanted me to. Because I knew exactly what Karen wanted. She wanted me to explode, to lose control, to cause a scene so she could paint me as petty, overly sensitive. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I turned, lifted my glass to my lips, and took a slow sip. As if that name tag meant absolutely nothing to me. And when my eyes met Karen's, I smiled. A calm, unbothered smile. Not angry, not wounded, just contemptuous. That smile made her frown. Not long after, my father approached. He didn't ask about the name tag. He didn't show a hint of anger at the fact that I had just been humiliated in his own party. Instead, he merely glanced at me, took a sip of his drink, and said in that infuriatingly indifferent tone, "I didn't think you'd come." I tilted my head, shrugged. Neither did I. A brief silence. "Are you still doing that job?" His voice was low, as if he was trying to sound polite, but couldn't quite hide the disdain. "Which job?" I raised an eyebrow. "The company you're running." I let out a laugh, unsure if it was from bitterness or exhaustion. "Yes, and it's doing better than ever." He didn't respond right away. He just looked at me for a long moment, as if assessing whether I was lying. Then he sighed, took a sip of his drink. "Good for you." That was it. No congratulations, no sign of pride, just an empty phrase before he turned and walked away, blending back into his crowd. I stood there, watching his figure disappear. Then I looked around this room, this place where everyone was complicit in my exclusion, Did they think I would endure all of this in silence? Did they think I would stay quiet? If so, they had forgotten something important. I was no longer the Lucy they once knew. I set my glass down, took a deep breath. Then I lifted my glass again, running my fingertip along the rim. A sharp clink rang out, cutting through the air. And the room fell silent. If they wanted a game, I would give them a show to remember. I stood in the center of the room, a chilled glass of champagne in hand. The atmosphere shifted, the weight of my action settling over the party like a thick fog. Conversations faded, one by one heads turned toward me. Some looked confused, others curious. But what pleased me the most was the look in my father's eyes. Unease. And Karen, her grip on her wineglass tightening, her expression laced with quiet alarm. They didn't know what I was about to do. I lifted my glass slightly and smiled. I suppose this is a special occasion, isn't it? A grand celebration for the man of the night. My father's shoulders relaxed slightly, maybe thinking I would simply say something polite and move on. He raised his glass, waiting. I let them wait. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch a little longer. Letting them wonder what I would say next. Then, with a voice calm but edged with ice, I continued. My father always taught me that family is meant to be a place of respect and support. That we should always stand by each other. Isn't that right? A few people nodded, assuming I was reinforcing my father's beliefs. They were wrong. I turned, meeting his gaze directly. But then I realized that, for some people, family only exists as long as you follow the rules they set. Step outside their expectations, and suddenly you become a disgrace. An outsider. The energy in the room shifted, instantly. Tension rippled through the crowd like a wave. My father blinked but said nothing. Karen forced a tight smile, her fingers gripping her glass as if she wanted to crush it. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, my father would see me differently. That he would finally acknowledge me. I let out a small, humorless laugh. But then I realized something. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I never even had a chance. Lowering my glass, I let my gaze sweep across the room, meeting each pair of eyes that had once dismissed me. My father only recognized those who followed the path he had set, the children he could control, mold to his liking. But me? I chose to live my own way, and for that, I became the family disappointment. I paused, raising an eyebrow with mock amusement. Oh no, wait, they were kind enough to remind me of that with the lovely little name tag they prepared just for me. A few people exhaled sharply. The murmurs started. I saw Hunter frown, Olivia's eyes widened. Karen tried to keep her composure, but her fingers trembled as she set her glass down. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Lucy, not now. I laughed. Not now? I tilted my head. Oh, but Dad, it seems like it's never the right time for you to acknowledge me as your daughter, is it? Silence. I stepped forward slowly, closing the distance between us. All my life I only wanted you to be proud of me. Just once. But I get it now. That will never happen. Because I'm not Hunter. I'm not Olivia. I'm not someone you can manipulate. I saw his jaw tighten, but he didn't deny it. Because he knew I was right. And my dear stepmother. I turned to Karen, giving her a slow, disdainful smile. You've spent years trying to erase me from your perfect little family portrait, but unfortunately for you, I'm still here. Karen stiffened but forced a fake smile. Lucy, you're being overly sensitive, it was just a joke. Oh, was it? I cut in, my voice light yet sharp as a blade. Well then, I have a joke for you too. I raised my glass, letting my gaze sweep across the room. Happy birthday, Dad, and congratulations to everyone here. I paused just long enough for them to hold their breath. Because this will be the last time any of you ever see me. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Olivia's mouth fell open, Hunter's brow lifted, Karen blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what was happening. And my father, he was frozen. Lucy, don't you dare. Glad I didn't let him finish. I set my glass down on the table and turned away. No explanations, no hesitation. I could hear the panic behind me. Some voices called my name. I didn't stop. I walked through the doors, feeling lighter than ever before. I wasn't running away. I was setting myself free. And as the doors shut behind me, I knew one thing for certain. I was never coming back. I slammed the car door shut, sitting upright in the driver's seat, my breath still unsteady from everything that had just happened. I had really done it. Not in a daydream. Not in some imagined scenario where I finally had the courage to stand up to them. I had done it, right in front of them. My heart was still pounding, but not from fear. Not from doubt. It was adrenaline, the rush of finally breaking free from the toxic cycle they had trapped me in. I pressed the ignition button, but didn't drive just yet. I sat there, staring through the windshield at the brightly lit mansion behind me. The music still played, but I knew no one inside was in the mood to celebrate anymore. They were talking. They were shocked. They were angry. And I didn't care. I pulled my phone from my purse and unlocked it. A string of messages flashed across the screen. Karen, you've gone too far, Lucy, come back immediately. Olivia, are you trying to ruin this party? Unbelievable. Hunter, you seriously have issues, talk to Dad. I let out a small, amused scoff, scrolling past them without replying. My phone vibrated in my hand. My father was calling. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. A part of me wanted to pick up, to hear what he had to say, but I already knew how this would go. He wouldn't apologize. He would only try to regain control, to feed me more empty words about family and responsibility. I declined the call. A text popped up immediately after. Dad. Come back, we need to talk. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to them. The next morning, I woke up in my small apartment, sunlight streaming through the window. No more fake laughter, no more snide remarks, no more condescending stares. I turned on my phone. Dozens of unread messages. I pressed block number on each name. Dad. Karen. Olivia. Hunter. Done. I sat still for a few seconds, waiting to see if guilt would creep in. But it never did. All I felt was relief. 3 days later, as I was getting ready for work, my phone rang from an unknown number. I hesitated, then decided to answer. My father's voice came through, low and steady as always. Lucy. I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. I want you to come back, he said bluntly. You can't just walk away from family like this. I let out a quiet laugh, stepping toward the window and looking down at the street below. Did you call to control me or to apologize? Silence. I already knew the answer. Family is supposed to stick together, Lucy. His voice dropped. I don't want this to escalate any further. I tightened my grip on the phone. Not escalate further? As if everything they had done to me before wasn't already enough. You never truly saw me as part of this family. I spoke slowly, each word severing the final thread between us. Don't pretend that you suddenly care now. Lucy, don't be selfish. I laughed. Did you really just say that? Once again, silence. I pulled the phone away, glanced at the screen, and slowly pressed the button to end the call. No goodbyes. In the weeks that followed, I heard nothing from them. Everything was eerily quiet. No more guilt-tripping messages, no more veiled threats, no more heavy feeling whenever my phone buzzed. But there were moments when I wondered if I had gone too far. Did I really need to cut them off completely? Maybe I should have given them a chance to change? But then I remembered. Every time they abandoned me, every belittling remark, every condescending glance. They hadn't changed, they never would. And I realized I had done the right thing. What does freedom taste like? It tastes like peace. Lucy's story is not just about cutting ties with the toxic family. It's about reclaiming her worth. Sometimes true freedom doesn't come from being accepted, but from having the courage to walk away from those who no longer belong in your world. Society binds us to the word family, but blood doesn't always mean love. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that bring you pain. True happiness comes when you choose a life where you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone except yourself. What do you think about Lucy's decision? Did she go too far, or was this something she should have done long ago? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, betrayal, and the journey to self-discovery. I never thought that a tiny microscope bought from a thrift store would be the only thing that made me feel like I had value in my family. Just like I'll never forget that afternoon when my mom screamed in my face just because I accidentally ruined my sister's hair bow while wiping the dinner table. "You were a mistake from the start," my mother said, her voice cold as steel. I was only 10. And my sister, Lily, was called my little angel by Mom, even though she had just scribbled ink all over the living room wall. If you think I'm exaggerating, just wait. Because I'm about to tell you about a childhood where unfairness wasn't just a habit, it was an unspoken rule in my house. I'm Emma Hayes, born and raised in a small town in Colorado. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't poor either. My parents were both office clerks. Stable, boring, and especially good at pretending. They always smiled sweetly at the neighbors, always acted like the perfect family. But once the door closed, it was a different world. One where I was nothing more than a shadow behind the spotlight they shone entirely on Lily. Lily was 2 years younger than me, with golden hair like a doll in a commercial and a smile that could make adults pull out their wallets without a second thought. Every year on Lily's birthday, our house turned into a carnival. Balloons, a 3-tier cake, a clown, and even a rented ice cream truck. Each gift was beautifully wrapped and placed neatly under a decoration tree Mom spent all day putting up. And my birthday? A small cake Mom rushed to buy at the grocery store, 3 crooked candles, and half-hearted wishes from eyes that didn't even bother to look at me. I was good at school, really good. From first grade I was top of the class, won school science competitions, and got mentioned by teachers at every parent meeting. But instead of being proud, my dad would just shrug. "She just buries her head in weird stuff. Who loves chemistry more than people?" I didn't love science to be better than anyone. I loved it because it was the only place where I felt heard. Every chemical reaction, every formula in my little notebook, was a small part of the world I built for myself. A world where no one could call me weird. Lily was the opposite. She hated books, hated studying, but somehow had an uncanny ability to manipulate adults. Every time she didn't get what she wanted, she cried, threw tantrums, pretended to faint, and the result? I got scolded for not being nice to my little sister. Lily's homework? I did it. Lily's science project? I made it. One time I protested. "I can't do everything, I have my own assignments too." My mother glared at me, voice sharp as a knife. "Mister should help each other. You're smarter, so it's your responsibility to share. Or are you just jealous because she's more loved?" That was the first time I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I bit my lip, nodded, and did Lily's work. Again. The older I got, the more I realized that to my parents I was the problem. I wasn't cute, didn't act sweet, didn't sit still so they could show me off like Lily. I asked questions, I challenged things, and worst of all, I didn't need them to find my passion. I once overheard my mom talking to a neighbor who complimented me. "Emma is smart, sure, but she's different. She's not like the rest of us." Different. That word stabbed me in the heart every time I remembered it. The only person who never made me feel different was my grandpa, Grandpa Frank. He was the only one in the family who actually listened, whose eyes lit up when I talked about new experiments at school. "That mind is gonna change the world," he'd say, ruffling my hair with a bright smile. I believed him. Only him. One time, when I was 12, he brought me an old microscope he found at a flea market. I screamed with joy, hugged him like I was hugging the whole world. "You're gonna see things your mother never will," he whispered. And he was right. I saw the sadness of being left behind, the coldness in my father's eyes, the calculated silence of my mother, and the sweet lie called family. You want me to stop here? Or do you want to know what finally made me no longer the invisible child? I promise you, everything that came after was even worse. I still remember that spring afternoon when I was 13. The sky was a strange gray, as if the universe itself was holding its breath with every beat of my heart. Class ended late that day. As I packed up my experiment, the faint scent of acid still lingering in my nose, my science teacher, Miss Bailey, called me over. Emma, do you have a minute? I nodded, heart skipping a beat. The school is nominating a few students for the state's gifted STEM program. I want to recommend you. I blinked. Me? Really? I've never seen anyone with your scientific intuition. You're not just smart. You're curious, persistent, and brave enough to ask the right questions. That's what science needs. I walked out of class that day feeling like I was flying. I didn't know much about the program, just that it was a rare opportunity that brought students closer to top research academies, maybe even early college scholarships. But more importantly, for the first time in my life, I felt seen. That night, I gathered my courage to bring it up at dinner. Lily was rambling on about the new dress Mom bought her. I waited until she stopped yapping. I was nominated by Miss Bailey for the gifted science program, I said, my voice trembling. They only pick a few students, and I got a spot to take the exam. My dad put his fork down and sighed, as if I had just said something troublesome. More nonsense, he muttered. My mom raised an eyebrow, looking at me with suspicion. Your sister just got selected to be a model for the school magazine. Why can't you think about doing something more presentable, instead of dragging test tubes home every day? I swallowed hard. I just need a signature for the exam form. No, my mom said firmly, this family doesn't have time for chasing silly dreams. You'll help Lily with her work this week. She has a literature essay due. I left the dinner table, my heart aching like it was being crushed. I didn't cry. I just felt like the world had slammed shut on me. Again. The next morning, while I was gathering my things for school, my grandmother, Grandma Margaret, called to me from the kitchen. Emma, come down here, she said. I tiptoed downstairs, afraid my parents might hear. She stood there with the application form in her hand, my handwriting still wet. You think I didn't know about this? She held up the form, her eyes glistening but her voice firm. You are going to let this go just because your parents don't understand? No, Emma, I won't let that happen. I had never seen her so resolute. That day, she went to school with me, submitted the form, and scheduled the test. Under the surprised eyes of Ms. Bailey and the principal, she said just one thing. I don't care what her parents think, I'll take full responsibility. The exam wasn't easy. But each question felt like a window opening into the world I'd dreamed of. Formulas, reactions, real-world problems needing logical thinking. I finished the test with a soft smile. For the first time in months. 3 weeks later I received an acceptance letter. I had passed, and not just that, I ranked first in the region. The letter also included an invitation to a summer science workshop with professors from Stanford University. I still remember opening that letter in Grandma's backyard. The late afternoon sun shone on the white paper, sparkling like magic. She took my hand, smiling brightly. If your grandpa were alive, he'd be jumping for joy, she said. You're the pride of this family, Emma, and don't ever let anyone make you forget that. That summer, I stepped into a whole new world. I met kids just like me. Ones who were called weird at their old schools but shined in the lab. We talked for hours about nanomaterials, stem cells, and clean energy solutions. And I didn't feel out of place anymore. By the end of 9th grade, I was awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious STEM-focused high school in another state. My mother was furious, calling me ungrateful. We raised you, and now you won't even stay to care for your family? What kind of person does that make you? It was Grandma who signed the papers for me to go. She helped me pack, took me to the airport, and hugged me tightly at the security gate. "Don't look back," she whispered in my ear. "Just keep looking forward." I didn't know then that every success that followed, every award, every discovery, every step closer to a college scholarship, started from that moment. From the form she signed, and the unconditional belief she had in me. If you ask me whether just one person's love can change your life, I'll say yes, and I'll say that person is my grandmother. I learned about Grandpa's illness through a vague part of a FaceTime call with my mom while I was on shift in the university lab at Boston. "With the way things are going, he might not have much time left," I heard my mom say, her voice lowering like she was whispering to someone. I looked up immediately, heart pounding. "Are you talking about Grandpa Frank? What's wrong with him?" Silence. Then her tone changed, soft, sweet like honey. "Oh, you heard that? It's nothing serious, just a little cold. Don't worry, Emma, he's fine, already getting better." I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice made me uneasy. It felt forced, not like how she usually spoke to me. "I want to come visit Grandpa," I said, not hiding my worry. "No need," my mom replied quickly. "Lily's taking care of them. You just focus on school. This is an important time for you." "But I'm his family too." "Well, so is Lily. You think your grandparents would be happy if you abandoned your internship for this?" I ended the call feeling unsettled. Something wasn't right. It was mid-September. I remember clearly because it was pouring rain, and I spent the entire night by the window, heart heavy. 2 weeks later, I decided to go home, without telling anyone. I headed straight to my grandparents' house, heart full of worry, but holding on to a bit of hope. Hope that it was all just a misunderstanding. That maybe I was just overthinking. I didn't expect Lily to be the one who opened the door. "Emma?" She raised an eyebrow like she'd seen a ghost. "I came to visit Grandma and Grandpa. How's he doing?" "No one's home," she said quickly, almost automatically. "So where are they?" "I don't know, I'm busy, you should go." I tried to push my way in, but Lily immediately blocked me, shoving the door hard. "I said no one's home. Lily, move, I'm their granddaughter. And I live here now, so please leave." The door slammed in my face, cold and chilling. I stood frozen. My hands trembled as I called Grandma. No signal. Phone off. Tried again. Nothing. She always left her phone on, especially for me. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd been shut out of my own life. I turned and headed to my parents' house, questions swirling in my head. They were surprised to see me, but quickly put on their usual blank faces. "Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked as soon as I stepped into the kitchen. My dad didn't look up from his newspaper. "They're in a nursing home now. Quick decision. They needed special care." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "You're busy. You're in Boston, why drag you back for this?" At the very least, I should have been able to call. Did they agree to it? My mom pressed her lips together. "We did what was best for them. And don't make a mess out of this. They didn't want to see you. They said, 'You've changed. You're distant.'" I couldn't speak. They said my grandparents didn't want to see me? After everything they'd done for me? I walked away without saying another word. Part of me wanted to believe they were just trying to protect me from something worse. But the truth didn't wait for me to be ready. 4 days later, I got a call from my mom. "Frank passed away." Just 4 words, but each one cut deep like a knife to the heart. I choked out. "When's the funeral?" "Saturday. 1 o'clock. Don't be late." I arrived at the church at 12:45, my heart tightening with every step. But the parking lot was empty. The church was silent, like a graveyard. I ran inside and found a custodian cleaning up. "Excuse me, Mr. Frank Hayes' funeral." "It's over, miss. They held it this morning, 9 o'clock. My head spun. I stood frozen in the aisle, tears streaming uncontrollably. Mom said 1 o'clock. She said 1 o'clock. I wrote it down. Even set an alarm last night. I called her right then. "Oh, Emma, why did you come so late?" she said, her voice disturbingly sweet. "I'm not late, I came at the time you told me." "We all agreed on 9 o'clock, she replied, without a hint of hesitation. "No, you said 1 o'clock, I wrote it down, I remember clearly." "You're just emotional, maybe you remembered wrong." Her voice was gentle like a breeze, but every word hit me like a slap. I understood now. They didn't want me there. They had crafted the whole plan, moving my grandparents somewhere else, cutting off contact, lying about the nursing home, and in the end, shutting me out of saying goodbye to the person I loved most. I collapsed into an empty pew, screaming silently. My grandfather, the only one who ever believed in me, was gone. Thinking I didn't bother to show up, that I had forgotten him. I wasn't there, and they made that happen. Some losses are unforgivable. Some wounds don't need blood to bleed, but they never truly heal. And some families don't deserve to be called family. 3 days after the funeral, I drove to my grandparents' house like a stranger returning to what was once home. My mind raced with anger and grief. I needed one thing: the truth. When Grandma opened the door, her face froze like stone. That gaze was no longer a place I could find comfort. "You dare show up here?" she said, her voice cold as ice. I swallowed hard. "I need to talk. About Grandpa, and why I wasn't at the funeral." She started to close the door, but I blurted out, "I didn't abandon him. They lied. Mom told me the funeral was at 1 o'clock. I came on time, but it was already over by 9. Her hand paused. "Since you went to college he kept calling you, but you never answered. He died feeling forgotten." "I didn't receive a single call," I said, shaking as I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a slip of paper. "This is the number he was calling." "It's fake. Mom and Lily gave him a fake number. I've had the same number since I was 16. She stared at Grandpa's handwriting on the note, then slowly stepped back. "Oh my God," she whispered, like she couldn't believe it. "I tried to see him. Lily blocked me at the door. I called you, your phone was off." "Why did they do this?" Her face went pale. I saw her hands tremble. A long silence settled like fog. "Come in," she said quietly. "We have things to settle." She made a call right then. Her voice was no longer soft, it was sharp and commanding. "Tom, Lily, both of you come to my house immediately, and bring the lawyer. David left a few things that need to be addressed. No, not tomorrow. Now." An hour later, the whole family was in the living room. The air was suffocating. Mom sat with her arms crossed, face cold as stone. Dad kept sighing. And Lily, she chewed gum and fiddled with her phone like nothing mattered. The lawyer Raymond was a man with graying hair and a thick leather briefcase. When he opened it, the room fell completely silent. The will was signed and legally notarized by Mr. David Hayes 3 months before his passing. Mr. Raymond said, laying out the documents on the table. "I will now read it, word for word." I clenched my hands as he began. "First, I, David Hayes, leave the entire current house, along with all personal savings, to my wife, Margaret Hayes. All living expenses for her remaining years will be covered." Grandma nodded slightly, her face unreadable. "Second, I leave full ownership and usage rights of the scientific research facility at 54A Riverbend Street, to my granddaughter, Emma Hayes. The laboratory has been fully constructed, operational permits granted, and equipment installed." A loud "What?" burst from Lily, followed by the screech of a chair being shoved back. A lab?" she stammered. I was speechless. Grandpa built a lab for me? A real research facility? "It's not over," Mr. Raymond said, his voice steady as stone. "The remainder of the estate, including company shares, investment accounts, and the second property, will be equally divided between my 2 granddaughters, Emma and Lily Hayes." The air turned thick. My mother whipped her head toward Mr. Raymond. "Are you sure? David? He couldn't have." "You're welcome to review the signature," the recorded video of the will reading, and the sworn statements of the 2 witnesses. Mr. Raymond replied coldly. I hadn't even processed it when my grandmother stood up, holding a neatly folded letter in her hand. There's one more thing, she said, her gaze sweeping across everyone. David left this for Emma. She looked directly at me as she opened the letter. Her voice trembled, but every word was clear. To Emma, my little scientist. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I'm sorry I couldn't wait to hug you one last time. But I know. It's not your fault. I called. I left messages. I waited. And I understand that sometimes walls are built by those you never expected. That lab. I built it for you, so you'd have a place to belong. No one can stop you anymore. You're going to change the world, Emma. Start right here. I broke down. Not because of the lab. Not because of the inheritance. But because Grandpa had known everything. And still believed in me. Until the very end. If someone asked me what moment changed my life forever, I wouldn't say the day I got into college or won a national award. I'd say it was that day, the day truth shattered all lies, and the voice of someone long gone was still strong enough to pull me up from betrayal. But the worst part wasn't over yet. Lily shot up from her chair like she'd been stabbed, her gun fell from her mouth, and her eyes flared like I had just stolen her crown. What? She screeched. She got what? A whole lab? Before I could respond, she turned to our parents, her face contorted with rage. What did you promise me? What did you say? That if I took care of Grandma and Grandpa, played the sweet granddaughter, I'd get everything. Everything. So what is this split it evenly nonsense? My father looked flustered, coughing to cover his discomfort. My mother fumbled like she'd just been caught red-handed. Calm down, Lily. Calm down. Calm down. She screamed like she'd lost her mind. She gets that crazy lab and I only get half? No way. Emma doesn't deserve this. She did nothing but bury herself in chemicals and act all smart. I stood up. My voice was calm and my eyes didn't flinch. If I'm so useless, Lily, why did you have to spend a whole year pretending to be the perfect granddaughter just to get Grandpa's money? She stepped back, then scoffed. That trashy lab isn't even worth anything. What are you going to do, sit in there and die alone running tests? The house is the real prize. Then she turned to Grandma and shouted, I want the house. I'm the one who deserves to live here. Grandma looked at her directly. Not angry, not compassionate. You don't deserve anything in David's will. But because he loved both of you, he still left you a share. And now you're disgracing that last bit of kindness with this behavior. No, Lily screamed, tears streaming. But they were bitter, poisonous tears with not a hint of remorse. I did everything right. Mom and Dad told me to be sweet, visit Grandpa every week, fake like I cared. So why is it Emma? The room fell silent. Even my parents didn't say a word. I turned to them, my voice eerily calm. And you think this is fair? My father exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disappointment. Emma, you're being dramatic. We're family, family shares. You've already been given more than enough. More? I let out a cold laugh. I don't recall you ever contributing a single dollar to my tuition. Not a single science camp, not one competition trip was paid for by you. It was all Grandpa and Grandma. You're trying to blame your parents now? My mother snapped, slamming her hand on the table. We raised you. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at Grandma. She gave a slight nod, as if to say I had the right to speak. Yes, you raised me. But how? By calling me a freak? By making me do Lily's homework and calling it my responsibility? By telling the neighbors I wasn't like anyone in the family, as if I was some stain? Emma, my mom barked. I'm not lying, I continued. You always treated me like the extra. Even when Grandpa died, you deliberately gave me the wrong time for the funeral, so I'd be humiliated. I'm hated just because I'm not Lily. And now that Grandpa left me something he quietly built for me, You want me to hand it over to the person who spent a year acting just to get his money? You're being selfish, Emma, my father said, his voice tired. If you had any respect for this family, you'd know how to sacrifice for your sister. I turned to him. You're right. But it's not that I'm not respectful, I just refuse to be used anymore. No one said another word. There was nothing left to say. Lily slammed her hand on the table. So what now? I get nothing? No one's on my side? Grandma stood up, her gaze colder than the first snow of the season. Lily, if you truly loved your grandparents, then even without getting anything, you would still have been the one Grandpa loved most. But you traded that love for personal gain. You didn't lose because Emma took something, you lost because you weren't worthy. Lily burst into tears, but no one believed those tears anymore. My mother stood up trying to grab Grandma's arm. Mom, this isn't worth blowing up. Not worth it? Grandma's voice was sharp. My husband's death was turned into a tool for manipulation. My granddaughter was slandered, pushed out of this family simply for being different. And now, with the truth laid bare, you still want to erase the last thing he left for her? Silence fell over the room. Grandma looked straight at them, then said firmly, I want all of you out of my house, immediately. I sat frozen in the corner, my breath heavy. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction, but I felt light. As if, for the first time, I didn't have to bow my head and beg to be acknowledged. Outside the window, the wind picked up, sweeping away years of dust on the old doorstep. The masks had fallen. What remained was the truth. And freedom. The room was thick with silence after Grandma asked the three of them to leave. But then she turned, not toward the door, but pulled from her pocket a deep yellow envelope, the kind Grandpa always used for his handwritten letters. There's one last thing, she said, her voice not loud, but ringing out like a church bell at noon. David left me a letter, told me to read it only when the truth came out. And I believe that moment is now. I stood up, heart pounding in my chest. Lily stood still as stone, while my mother tried to mask the worry spreading across her face. My father leaned forward slightly, as if to snatch the letter before she could read it. But the look in Grandma's eyes stopped him cold. She opened the letter, her hands only slightly trembling, but her gaze unwavering. To Margaret, my partner in life. If you're reading this, then I am likely gone. And if those I love are listening, I hope they'll listen with their hearts, not with anger. Her voice dropped as she continued, each word tearing through the last mask left in the room. I've lived long enough to know that family doesn't always love the way we hope. And I'm clear-minded enough to realize, love with conditions isn't real love. Emma, the little girl always clutching her microscope, her eyes lighting up with every discovery, is the only grandchild who never disappointed me. Not because she's brilliant, but because she's honest. Honest with herself, with her passion, and with her pain. Grandma paused. Lily bit her lip, eyes red. Not from emotion, but from rage fermenting inside her. Tom, Julia, Grandma continued reading, looking directly at my parents. I can't forgive you, not because you didn't love Emma, but because you deliberately chose not to. You picked one child and discarded the other. You treated affection like currency. Emma only mattered when she was useful, when she pleased others. My mother clenched her fists, veins bulging under her skin. My father turned his face away. I know you lied about Emma changing her phone number. I know you tricked me into thinking she didn't want to see me. And what hurt the most was lying in that hospital bed, calling over and over and no one answered, while Emma thought I had turned my back on her. Grandma's voice began to shake. David wrote further, I don't need anyone to apologize for those lies, but I want the truth to come to light. And I want you, Margaret, for the rest of your life, to do what's right. Not for pride, not for blood, but because Emma deserves it. Protect her, as you once did. She folded the letter, eyes now red with tears. Then she looked up and met each gaze, her children, and the granddaughter they had turned into a puppet. That was David's final wish, the man you manipulated until his very last breath. No one said a word. No one could. Then she turned to the lawyer. Raymond, I want you to draft an addendum to the will, if it's allowed. I don't want any of them to ever have the right to enter this house again. And if they try to contest anything, I will present this letter in court. Lily screamed, No way, you don't have the right. I have every right, Grandma cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. Because I'm the only one who kept my promise to your grandfather. My father started to rise, but Grandma pointed to the door. I've lost my husband. I don't need to lose my dignity too. Get out of my house now. And if you have any decency left, leave quietly. No one argued. There were only the pounding footsteps and the sound of the door slamming shut behind them. In that moment, I didn't feel relief. I felt justice. Grandma turned to me, her eyes now filled only with love and sorrow. Your grandfather waited for you, and now you must live for the part of his life he didn't get to finish. I hugged her, tears falling onto her wool sweater. The place that used to be the safest in my childhood. Truth can be cruel, but it's the only thing that can wash away the stains left by lies. And in that house, with the scent of old paper still lingering on the letter, I knew. I no longer had to prove my worth to anyone. Because the one who mattered most had always believed in me. It's been 6 years since the will was read. 6 years since that afternoon when Grandpa's letter shattered every illusion I had about family. But from that rubble, I began rebuilding my life, brick by brick. With truth, knowledge, and immeasurable gratitude. The lab on Riverbend Street has become the place where I live, work, and breathe. More than just a facility Grandpa left behind, it's a symbol of the faith he placed in me. The one flame that never went out, even when the world turned its back. I've expanded the lab into an independent research center specializing in renewable energy. My team is small but resilient. Together we've secured 3 federal grants, published 7 research papers, and recently signed a partnership with an international nonprofit to bring green energy solutions to underprivileged rural communities. Every time I walk through the glass doors engraved with Frank Hayes Research Center, I think of his eyes the day I won my first science award. Eyes that have never left me. Grandma is still healthy. She visits the lab every Wednesday afternoon, bringing apple pie and a long list of science questions. I read about hydrogen batteries last week, she says, excited like a first grader. But I still don't quite get the electrolysis part. Can you explain it again? I laugh, but I always explain patiently. She writes everything down in a blue-covered notebook, the one she calls her 80-year-old scientist's handbook. I don't just want to watch, she says. I want to understand what you're doing, so that one day, when I see Grandpa again, I can tell him everything. Every time she says that, my heart aches. A mix of emotion and the quiet reassurance that I'm living a life Grandpa would be proud of. I no longer keep in touch with anyone from my old family. Not out of hatred, but for peace. Messages, calls, emails, all blocked. I don't read them, don't reply, don't care. Once, Lily messaged me from a strange number, a long drawn-out text complaining about being unemployed and forced by Mom and Dad to shoulder the family's debt. At the end she wrote, "Don't you remember we're family?" I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I kept it as a reminder. Some people only remember you when they need something, not when they care. My mom once called the center, left a short voicemail. Just wanted to hear your voice. I didn't listen, I deleted it immediately. Not because I'm heartless, but because I'm no longer the girl who waited for her mother's approval after every award. I already have everything I need. A home that is a laboratory. A grandmother who is my ally. A purpose not bound by anyone else. On my desk, there's a small framed photo. In it, a faded image of me at 7 years old, holding a magnifying glass, hair messy, mouth wide open as I stared at a ladybug crawling across Grandpa's palm. He leaned in beside me, pointing at it, eyes twinkling like stars. On the back of the photo, written in fountain pen, "My little scientist is going to change the world. I don't know if I'll ever change the whole world, but I do know this. I've changed my own. I no longer live to prove anything to anyone. Except myself, and him." One time, a student in my research group asked me, "Emma, why did you choose to work in this lab when you're good enough to be at MIT or any top institute?" I looked out the glass door. That afternoon, wildflowers were blooming by the steps. Just like they did when I was little. Wrapping my arms around Grandpa's legs, running through the backyard. "Because this is the only place in the world," I answered, "where I never had to ask permission to be myself." Emma's story isn't just about escaping injustice and betrayal in her family. It's a testament to the power of belief, passion, and unconditional love. In life, sometimes the ones closest to us hurt us the most. But just one person truly believing in us, like Emma's grandfather, can be enough to help us rise and rewrite our fate. The greatest lesson is this: you don't need the world's approval. You just need the courage to live your truth, and to choose love that asks for nothing in return. What do you think about Emma's journey and the choices she made? Would you have done things differently? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional stories about family.